Hi, everyone. I'm so glad that you're with us today. My name is Rebecca Sofer. I am the co-founder of Modern Loss, which is an in real life and digital forum solely focused on bringing people together to kind of guide each other through the long arc of grief and loss, because it is a forever thing, a 24/7 thing, and it's something that ebbs and flows along the way. And our goal is to provide a forum for conversation and reflection and even laughter in the commiseration of all of it. And I'm particularly excited to be here today for this episode because we are going to be talking about grieving public figures. Not just celebrities, but any bold-faced names who are in the news who you might not actually know in person. You might have never even been in the same room with them ever, but their loss when they die affects you on some level. And when it affects you, you think to yourself, that's weird. It's not like they're my parent or my friend or even a colleague, but I'm like really affected. Like I really feel jolted by this. And in the 8 years that I have helped to run Modern Loss, this is a thing that just comes up time and again. It's just something where a lot of our readership wonder what's wrong with them. Why is it that when, say, a celebrity dies and it's trending on Twitter, that all of a sudden they're kind of grappling with this sadness and this confusion and this, kind of like foundational jolt. And the person who is going to help me talk about it today is someone who I greatly admire, who I've loved knowing for several years. Her name is Alicia Lacey. She is the program director at Dougy Center, the National Grief Center for Children and Families, based out of Portland, Oregon, and, a place where I would just love to be right now. They have been an incredible support and, kind of guiding light for me at Modern Loss over the years. They have this enormous wealth of online information that obviously help children and their families who are moving through grief. But even if you don't have kids, even if you're not dealing with kids, I have personally felt that a lot of their resources and advice just apply to anybody in general who's moving through loss. A lot of this is just incredibly helpful, practical, tactical advice that you can kind of fold into your own grief experience and, kind of look at things in new ways. So I'm really happy Alicia's here. Thank you so much for joining today.
Oh, it's nice to be here with you. Thanks for having me.
So I think we should just dive right into it. Last year, was it last year? I mean, what is time really? I don't even know anymore after COVID, but at the beginning of last year in the news, I see on Twitter, Kobe Bryant's killed in a helicopter crash, in a plane crash. And I was very jolted because I actually went to high school with him. So it was very jarring for me, but I kind of saw this immediate, mushrooming online, like all of these hashtags, all of these people sharing memories, all of these people reacting, and not just in complimentary ways, just in whatever ways were coming up for them. Clearly, this death struck a chord with people on a visceral level. And, I've seen it time and again, when singers die, the rapper DMX died. Earlier this year, you see the death of figures who, help create social movements like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, everything that stemmed from their death in a public way. And so I would just like to ask you, are we crazy for feeling like when somebody dies who we have never met, like we are actually truly experiencing feelings of grief?
Absolutely. I think all of us in some way or another can always relate to that feeling, different for different public figures. But I think there's an absolute just connection to our immediate own mortality that just makes us think that these people in the public light who we maybe have held in high esteem or, somewhat feel like they're kind of untouchable, when something tragic happens and they die, we're like, wow, that can happen to anyone, that could happen to me. So I feel like that's one of the kind of the first reactions is our own touch with mortality. And then also really kind of our connections with public figures are really also connections with other people. Do you love Kobe Bryant so much because you used to watch, all the games with your dad? Or, do you have a certain artist that you listen to with all of your friends? So kind of thinking about your relationships with other people as well and how that's impacted by the death, I think is all kind of contributing to it.
That makes so much sense to me. Now, I will tell you, he was old. So I'm prefacing it by saying he was very old, but was it earlier this year or late last year, Carl Reiner died. And he was in his 90s, right? But when he died, I was so sad because my dad introduced me to Carl Reiner. My dad loved Your Show of Shows and all of the skits that came out of it. And he took me to see Laughter in the 23rd Floor on Broadway. And he really got me into like all the Mel Brooks things. And, my dad died 10 years ago. And when I read that Carl Reiner died, I knew like logically that A, I had never met him and B, that he had lived a very, very full life. It wasn't like a traumatic, like tragedy by any stretch of the word, but it really made me sad. And I sat with it. And then I thought about conversations that you and I had had in the past. And I was like, yeah, I mean, because it's really like this tie that I had to my dad. It's like kind of like one less active tie in the world that exists to
Absolutely.
that memory.
Yeah. And I think it really just kind of connects us to our other grief and loss experiences as well. So it can kind of just ignite that little bit of missing your dad or, kind of the other feelings where you've had that grief. And so a little bubble pops up, and just kind of depending on how big or small it may be that day, it's something that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So like what now? So basically we're not crazy if we feel legitimately sad. Like if we need to take a moment, when say David Bowie dies and cry a little bit, I might have done that. And I might have actually gotten a Ziggy Stardust manicure the next day. I mean, but like if we really feel like we're reeling a bit and need to kind of retreat, I just want to be clear with everyone. That's not a weird thing, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, that's exactly what we would suggest you do, right? Kind of attend to your grief in whatever way you need to be. If you need to be sad for a day or a week, then do that. If you need to, kind of endlessly listen to the music and kind of just process through and think about those times, that's fine. If you need to talk about it with somebody else and kind of share your feelings, great, do that too.
So let me ask you, let's say that we're affected by a celebrity death and we kind of want to share it with our friends or our family or the people we live with, but we feel a little silly. Give us some advice. Like, what is the best way that we can express, hey, I'm legitimately sad, like I'm legitimately affected. I'm legitimately feeling triggered, by what just happened and say it in a way where they really respect what we're going through. Because I do think that there's this kind of like silliness attached to like, oh, it's just a celebrity, you never knew them. But like, we just clarified that it's not. I mean, it can actually be real grief. Like, so what's the best way that we can kind of share this with people from whom we need maybe not support, but at least understanding?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say go to that friend who's your best listener, right? Go to that friend who you feel like you can tell them anything and they're still gonna kind of sit there and listen to you, just because that's what we need in grief. We need to be heard. We need someone who's gonna sit there and say, okay, that sounds really wild. I don't have those feelings, but I'm totally here for you. And I'm totally gonna listen and I understand why you're feeling that way right now. And even if I don't understand, keep telling me, because I want to hear what you're feeling and I want to support you through this. So I think sometimes that feels a little bit harder, a little daunting because we're like, this is somebody I didn't even know. But I also feel like with social media these days, celebrities kind of are, public figures, I guess, are sharing so much of their private life that we're scrolling through their feed as if they are our friends. And so yes, we maybe haven't met them, but we're seeing all these intimate details and then all of a sudden that's gone. So I think that kind of melds into things as well.
So you just touched upon social media. And I'm wondering, I feel like it can be this enormous comfort, but it can also be this source of incredible overwhelm, when you're moving through something like grief and loss, when you're moving through like a major life transition, social media can help and also hinder. So what, I think that we're really good at coming up with hashtags like RIP DMX or, missing my dad, or, we love mourning together. And I do think there's real power in it because it can really make us feel like we're part of a community and we're with other people. Even if we don't know them, we're like holding like some sort of like memorial for that person. But it can get overwhelming. So like, what do we do if we're scrolling and then we're really distracted and all we're doing is searching for those hashtags or feeling pressure like we need to like speak up and share our memories of that person, and if we don't, then maybe our relationship with them wasn't valid.
I think, there's always the two sides to social media. Of course, there are some really great ways to connect. And then there's also, a lot of dangers to it or ways that it can become unhealthy. So really just kind of having a strong awareness around what your experience is. Is it helpful for you to kind of scroll through and see what other people are saying? Possibly that brings up kind of good memories for you or things that are feeling comforting. Sometimes it can be not so pleasant. And so if you're really feeling that you're realizing that you're reacting in a negative way, it's probably good to step away, try to kind of find some other way to engage yourself, take care of yourself in a different way, and really just kind of monitor how that actually feels for you instead of just kind of mindlessly scrolling.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm also wondering, celebrities and public figures, they're human, they're flawed, they're fallible. I think we all know that now because we're all like intimately connected with, everybody's tiniest flaw that is called out on social media, right? But there are certain figures who, when they die, they really do elicit polarized reactions, like diametrically polarized reactions in some people. So what if we feel like somebody who dies, who is in the public eye and who's being kind of almost like sanctified in the press, because I think there's this tendency to, when somebody dies, not immediately look at their shortcomings or maybe their less savory realities, but really talk about like the good things and like what they contributed to the world and what a great person they were. But again, they weren't perfect and they probably did a lot of very human, not so great things. So what if we're looking at the news and we're feeling triggered? Let's say that a celebrity dies who has, been convicted of a certain crime or who stands for something that you don't believe in, that really triggers something in your identity that you don't believe in. And you're feeling like you're almost in the vocal minority of that group because everybody else is talking about what an amazing person they were. I mean, I want to make sure that those people feel seen too. What can they do?
I think there's a real value in being able to kind of speak to the way that you're feeling. And so that if you're feeling able to share your perspective, I do think that can be really helpful for others. It's likely that you're not the only single person having that feeling. You just may be the first one or kind of, in the minority of people who are willing to share that. But I do think that can be a really strong support for other people just to kind of get that other voice in the room and offer that perspective. At the same time, I understand that is a risk to take. It's kind of a big step to take out if you're really feeling maybe like you don't have it all in you right in that second to kind of be that strong voice.
Yeah. So if you don't have it in you to be that strong voice, is there some way that you can still kind of make yourself heard and, talk to somebody about whatever is coming up in you? Because it could be eliciting reactions of, somebody who is, say, convicted of a crime like murder or, abuse or rape or, just, or somebody who stood for, somebody that something that might take away your rights or something you believe in. If you don't, it's not everybody can be a person who stands up on their platform and uses it to, kind of say their truth. I don't want people to feel pressured to have to do that, but how can they still feel like they're being heard and helped if they're feeling this way?
Yeah, I mean, I think even just, again, finding that kind of trusted person who can be your sounding board, checking in with that person. Maybe it's professional, maybe you have a therapist or somebody that you seek more formal support from, and that you're able to engage in that conversation and really just kind of process how it's impacting you in that moment. And maybe it's even something as simple as just, kind of journaling or writing it down for yourself, and nobody else is really even planning to see, but at least you're able to kind of process that through and kind of just share those sentiments.
So what about kids? Let's talk about kids, because first of all, that's your wheelhouse. And also, a lot of people watching today, we were all once kids and we know what it feels like to read that somebody we really looked up to has died. And so those of us who had kids in our lives, when a celebrity dies and they are affected, I think that there is sometimes this disconnect between grownups and kids about I mean, I just, I remember just how passionate I was as a teenager and thinking that the world was ending, for every little thing, because it really felt that way. If somebody I looked up to died, it really did feel like the world was ending, because first of all, I, was just embracing immortality, a feeling of immortality at that point. And also I, just wanted to feel like the grownups in my life understood how very much this hurt. And I feel like grownups don't always understand the role that a celebrity plays in a kid's life, a sports figure, a singer, an actor, whatever. I think it's easy for us to forget how we felt when we were younger. So what are good ways that grownups can not only model healthy grieving behavior for kids, but also really make them feel heard?
I mean, I think as far as kind of any age kid, it's always about just honesty and age appropriate information. So really kind of, having discussions with them that feel like they're valid and true, but also kind of understanding how much information maybe they need to know. For younger kids, that may be more filtered than with maybe teens, where you can have a pretty, possibly detailed conversation about the things that or maybe finding out the things that they know. Really kind of asking them questions about what have you heard and what are you reading, and what are the things that you're wondering about when you're hearing this information, and then also just really kind of figuring out I guess if you don't know already, but just kind of figuring out what their connection is to that public figure. So, if it's a musician, what was your favorite song? Or, kind of how did you most feel connected to that artist? Like, what did they do that you saw yourself in? Just kind of really asking them questions and trying to get into their own interest and their own level. And being a great listener. It's not necessarily our job to fix it or take it away, just kind of being there to listen and hear what they're going through kind of on their own timeline is really the best support you can be, especially for teens, I think, who kind of need that space sometimes, and they need to do things on their own timeline, not on their adults' timeline.
So what do you think the reaction in kids would be if we went out of our way to really, understand the person who died and understand what that connection was? Like, how can that help kids? Even if, especially teenagers, they don't always show us, like what they're thinking. They don't always talk to us, but what are some positive outcomes of that, even if we don't see them directly?
Well, I mean, ultimately, it builds trust and it builds a foundation for your relationship so that kids and teens can know that their adult is going to be there in hard times, and that they will have kind of that support when needed. And they'll also have the space that they might need if they feel like they need privacy or just kind of more time to do things. So that foundational trust is kind of a key part. And then really just kind of in the grief process, it's giving them what they need so that they're able to kind of process and also really normalize their feelings as well, so that they're not feeling like, oh, this is so weird that I'm reacting this way. They can feel that grief is natural and normal, and it kind of primes for if there's other, when there are other losses in their life, and it can kind of set that those conversations up for the future losses that they may experience.
That's really helpful. Thank you. I feel like, there's so many different ways to lose your life in this world. And some of them are a little bit more societally taboo to talk about, certain illnesses, suicide, I don't believe they should be stigmatized to talk about, but yet they are in society. And so not all of us feel equipped to have conversations about these topics with people, especially kids. So if we're trying to support a child of any age, like just a teenager or a younger person who is grieving somebody who died by suicide, for example, and we're like, oh, but we're not there. Like, I'm not a therapist. I don't know how to talk to you about this. Like, where can we find some support in having these conversations? Almost like a script, because I know that I personally have needed a script at times in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dougie Center does have some resources through our website, dougie.org. We've got a ton of different tip sheets. We also have a podcast called Grief Out Loud that touches on many of these different topics. We also look to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, afsp.org, and that's also a really great resource specifically related to suicide death. So really just kind of thinking through, but those conversations can feel clunky. It's certainly not something that I would say comes naturally, unfortunately, because of the stigma that kind of we all have surrounding it. And so kind of trying to break through that really does, again, just kind of build so many pathways so that you're able to talk with your kids about these really important issues, because more than likely they've heard it all, right? They know it. So having that conversation with their adult caregiver is just really important in that relationship.
And what about continuing a relationship? Because when somebody dies, especially at Modern Loss, our whole thing is about showing people that you have various ways that you can stay connected to your person. It's as important to stay connected to your person as it is to stay connected to yourself and to the outside world around you. And that just because somebody dies, like obviously we would most of the time rather they still be with us in our lives. But when they're gone, relationships can still evolve. They can still grow. They can still be nuanced and take on, new facets as time goes by. And at least in my experience, I found that kind of the same can happen when it's somebody that you've never even met, if they're important to you. So what are some ways in which, we can really keep relationships alive? So that, we tend to really, when somebody dies, like in the interim, a lot of us are just focused on the death. I mean, of course, because it's terrible. It's, like grief comes up, anger, confusion. But eventually, as time goes by, what can we do to kind of keep that positive connection going with that person?
Yeah, keep telling the stories, whether that's, I first listened to this song at this time, kind of reflecting on your experience and interacting with that public figure. And, if it's, a musician or actor or actress or something like that, where you can kind of continue to view or use their pieces. So doing it in that way, maybe it's kind of continuing to wear the shirt that has them on it, or really just kind of talking about them. So I think it's just kind of passing it on, kind of your knowledge, and that doesn't necessarily need to end. I guess that's the benefit that they are public figures. There's usually so much out there that you can kind of still engage with, although it's in a different way.
And also so much, like if they're a public figure, chances are there's so much footage that you haven't even seen yet that you can still, like one of the things about my mom dying is, she died 14 years ago, is that I feel like, oh gosh, all the emails she sent me are all the emails I'm ever going to get. Like there's nothing new coming down the pipeline. But sometimes I'll have these conversations with somebody who was a friend of hers or an acquaintance, and they'll tell me this anecdote about her just out of the blue. And it just feels like I got this extra bonus, like this bonus footage of my mom, this bonus, angle of her that I would have never otherwise found out. And I feel like kind of the benefit with public figures, with whom we have a positive relationship, is that chances are there's something that you haven't seen about them, some sort of song, some sort of poem, something they've written, some score they've made that you haven't witnessed that you're going to be able to see at some point down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. You find this little gem and it's this little gift that you can explore and then re-engage.
Yeah. Well, I am just really grateful that you made the time to talk about this with us today because, this is just something that it comes up time and again, whenever there is a hashtag, RIP whoever on Twitter, inevitably there, people start sharing their memories of that person. They say, wow, I didn't realize how much this would throw me for a loop. And so we really just wanted to kind of address it directly, which saying, it's okay that you're thrown for a loop. In fact, it makes complete sense that you are. And so what are some ways that people can engage with all the resources that Dougy Center has to offer?
Yeah, probably the best way is, again, going to our website. So that's Dougy, DOUGY.org. And there's a wealth of information on our website. We're always available, to just call our main line and talk to our staff. But ultimately, I think the resources piece is going to be on our website.
Okay, great. Alicia, thank you so much for being with me today. I really appreciate it. And I just want to thank everybody who's here today. Feel free to put your comments and your questions in the comment section. Alicia and I are going to be responding to them. We just can't do it simultaneously right now because I'm personally not that organized. But anything that, you have to share or ask, please include it because this series is just this, I feel very lucky to be a part of it. I'm really grateful that 1-800-Flowers provides this platform for us to have these types of conversations because, not everything is a happy celebration in life. But just because it doesn't mean that, you're broken or you're never going to move through it intact. It just means that you need the invitation to talk about it and reflect upon it. Because if not, it's just going to sit inside. You're never going to feel like you are able to move through it in the way in which you needed to. And so I'm really, really grateful to 1-800-Flowers for this series, Right After Loss. And thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a really wonderful rest of your day.